Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the BBH 15 Second Chance Story Series. Today, we are going to be talking about Mitchell Hammond from BBH Season 9. And joining me to talk about Hammond himself is the winner of BBH Season 9, Miss Kieran. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well. Excited to be back.
I know. Yeah. Well, anytime we can get you to do some BBH related stuff, I want to have you back because you were such a fun winner, such a huge part of season 9. And so it made perfect sense to have you back to talk about Hammond.
Definitely about Mitchell too.
So what was your reaction when I hit you up and was like, we're going to talk about Mitchell Hammond for a second chance?
Well, yeah. When you texted me, first of all, you asked if I wanted to talk about someone from season 9 with you before you told me who it was. And so I was nervous because I was like, man, there's a handful of people I really don't want to come on here and talk about with you. There's like probably only 2 or 3 who I feel like I have something good to say about. And I'm so glad it was Mitchell. One, because I'm really excited that he's cast again because I think he played a really good game in season 9, but I think there were definitely things for him to learn from. So I'm excited to see him come back and do better, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, since his time in the BBH 9 house, he has gone on to become a really well-rounded player.
Right.
So I'm excited to have him back too, to see him bring that back in here because BBH 9 was his first org.
Right.
So, and as it was with you too, but you were one and done. So
Yeah, correct.
So remind me about you and Hammond's journey because you guys were so close on day 0.
Yeah.
You worked together and then ultimately you sent him home.
Yeah, I know. So I always told Josh and I always told Eric, if I ever played BBH, I would want to come in and from the beginning find someone who I trusted, who would be willing to do the play both sides of the house situation with me. And it needed to be someone who was not I don't know, super flashy. It needed to be someone who could kind of play under the radar, who could be really loyal and trustworthy. Because I think the danger of what happens. So Mitchell and I hit it off on day 0. I really liked him as a person, right away. I think he did a really good job, playing the social game. And then we decided to kind of play both sides of the house throughout the entire game, which worked really, really well for us. And I needed to know that whoever I was going to do that with wasn't going to be someone who would get halfway through the game and get power hungry, really on their own kind of play for themselves trip so that I could play that game with them. And I think we both kind of had an understanding throughout the game that we would get as far as we could. And then eventually one of us would have to go home.
Right.
So, and unfortunately it was, well, not unfortunately for him, it was him who
right.
ended up.
Yeah. And I think that estimation of him as a player is so accurate.
Yeah.
So low key, so chill, will consume information and just he takes it in, and then he uses it when he needs to.
Right.
And I think the skills that I've seen him develop later into other games that he's played, the seeds and the foundation were there just from the get. You can't teach stuff like that.
Yeah, and I definitely think he played an excellent social game in the sense that no one ever would have guessed from him that he was talking to everyone in the house. Does that make sense? No one would have guessed that he was the one who had a secret alliance that no one knew about.
Right.
And he never really presented himself as a huge power threat. There were a handful of other players in our season who were like that. So I don't think anyone he was liked by all and he was an enemy of no one. There was no one that he really was on their bad side. No one really had it out for him. And usually those players kind of get booted pretty early on because they're kind of not doing much in the house, but he somehow played it so beautifully that everyone trusted him. I remember having conversations like through the beginning of jury and saying like, oh, okay, like who are you talking to? Like, what's your vibe of the house? And everyone was like, oh, I really like Mitchell. I really trust.
Mhm.
But somehow no one noticed that everyone really liked Mitchell and really trusted Mitchell, you know?
Yeah. No, it will come to you and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, this is like my best friend. This is my number one." He's so easy to talk to.
Right. And so I feel like I have two views of him. One being someone who is like in the game playing like right side by side with him. And then going back and watching through the entire season and getting to see from the outside kind of how he played his game. And I think I would have suspected that he was doing a really good job socially. I mean, he had to have been considering how well we played together until the end. Like he was doing a really good job with his side of the house. I was doing my thing with my side of the house. Um, but then when I came out, I saw even more how he had built such strong connections with groups of people that I maybe suspected that he was a part of, but like I didn't know the full extent of
Mhm.
like kind of how well he was playing for himself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he had I believe the gentleman alliance of all the guys. He had, great individual relationships. You guys were obviously very close. Do you
Yeah.
do you think that he's spooked by the fact that ultimately you, his number one ally, sent him home and he'll like come into this game a little differently, or do you think he'll play very similarly and try and find like a ride or die?
Yeah, so him and I have talked a little bit about how the season went, and because I really afterward, if you remember the season 9 finale, he was, like, relatively very angry at me about sending him home.
Right.
Um, and I really, like, wanted to have a chance to sit down and talk with him and really kind of debrief why I sent him home, not so much, like, stand up for myself because, I mean, I went on to win the game, so I regret nothing.
Right.
But, like, really tell him what happened throughout his game that ended up me wanting to send him home. So I hope that he really, like, took that and learned from it, and I mean, I think he would do really, really well doing something similar to what he did in season 9, and like I said, since he wasn't, like, such a huge flashy player, I don't think there are gonna be other people coming into second chances thinking like, "Oh, Mitchell Hammond, he's one to, like, watch out for immediately." Like, I'm sure you guys
Mhm.
some bigger personalities, crazy threat type people. Um,
In the BBH sphere, I
yeah,
definitely think he has a lower threat level
right.
than other players. However, in the org sphere, if
Okay,
people know him and have seen him play the last couple games that he's played, I think potentially he could have a big threat on his back just because the game after BBH, he ends up winning like in a landslide. The game that he just finished playing, he made the finale again. So like
yeah,
he has learned from the first experience
like,
and he's
probably
gone on, yeah, to do so well. So I think if people only think about BBH, he could
maybe,
potentially find himself in a good spot.
yeah, but you're
So
nervous for the rest.
I am a little bit just because I know him and I know some of the people that he's cast with and I know that they know these things about him.
I say,
Um,
if knowing that what you're saying to me, then I don't know if playing a similar game that he did in season 9 will work out as well for him because I think the reason it did so well for him and for me to start was that no one really thought
mhm.
of either of us. Like no one, since neither of us had been in the org community, I had like, yeah, neither of us had been in the org. We didn't go in with anyone knowing our
Right.
name or like what type of game we play or anything like that. So then, like, we did really well, kind of playing under the radar, being friends with everyone. Everyone thought and assumed that we were really genuine in all of our
Mhm.
connections because they had no reason to think otherwise. Um, I will say from what I remember from season 9, I think he did a really good job considering it was his first org. I mean, it was my first org too, so take what I say with a grain of salt about this. Um, but I think what really hurt him, at least in his relationship in our alliance, was the fact that he was really trying to figure out like what information do I share, what information do I not share.
Right.
to the point where when I was in the game, yes, I would have said the whole time he was my number one alliance. And I believe he would have said the same thing about me. But there were definitely things throughout the season that he did and that he said that made me kind of doubt his loyalty in a sense. Just with things like I found out from other people that he was in different alliances that he then didn't tell me about or said he wasn't being a part of, which is not a problem. He wasn't, I never thought he would have it out for me. But
Right.
there were some of those things that I was like, he's not being fully transparent and honest with me. And I know that's part of the game. But then in the end, that's really what kind of
Mm-hmm.
had me sending him home. Because when it came down to it, there were a couple moves that he made throughout the game that showed me, as he should have been, he was looking out for himself for sure over our alliance, which I mean, ultimately I was too. But then when it came down to it and I was deciding who I was going to put up, who I knew would go home, um, I think if I would have had more confidence in him, like he hadn't had
Yeah.
some people, like withholding information from me, like maybe I would have trusted him to stand up and have my back the next time around. But I just didn't have.
Right.
I think he would have, and I know he wouldn't have, just like I.
You guys had reached the impasse, right? We had
Right.
reached the impasse.
And I have a hard time judging, like, was it just me judging that about him? Like, I just,
Right.
like, sensed that in him, or was that actually, like, a flaw or a weakness of his that he didn't, like, play that as
Mhm.
he could have? So I'll be
Well,
interested. Yeah.
yeah, I'm very curious. I'm curious what you think he needs to do this time around. Like if you're thinking now, like maybe he can't play the same game, like what kind of game do you think he needs to do to be successful?
You know, so obviously his social game will be one of his greatest assets. Um, I don't know because I don't know who the rest of the cast is
That's
or who
true.
he's playing with and against.
That's true.
So
I think for him, he needs to find other people that he assesses as big threats.
right, and I will say, I think it will take from him really being from the get go, being able to get a read on the house and who
Mm-hmm.
he's with, and kind of adapt his strategy from there. Um, because I mean, we could talk about all of what we think are the very best BBH
Mm-hmm.
strategies, but really it just depends on who's playing, like
Yep.
who's up against what other people are doing. So I mean, I think that's true for every cast member, but especially for him, it'll
Mm-hmm.
be him being able to quickly recognize like what people are perceiving about him. Like, do people see him as a threat, or is he going to be able to get away with this kind of
Yeah.
low key player game? So
I think he's gonna get clocked for that like really fast. And I think if he's gonna be successful, he's gonna need to really take the game into his own hands as early as possible. And
yeah,
he can't sit back, I don't think. I think if Hammond sits back, he's in a lot of danger. And I think if he's a little bit proactive, I think that's always a risk, but I think it could work out for him.
that is tricky
Um,
to balance because if he then goes in, especially as you're saying, he's done so well in other orgs. If he goes in too strong, almost people will be like, "Oh, we know
yeah.
he's a big threat." So I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, let me ask you one final question. What do you think his second chance story is?
I can tell you what I would love to see.
Please.
I would love to see him go in and play a similar game to what we did. Obviously, it'll be different because he'll probably have to be more bold and proactive, like you said. But I would love to see him play like a secret alliance with someone or a really tight one-on-one alliance. Because I really think that's what it takes is getting someone to trust you more
Mhm.
than they trust someone else and having someone on your side who's willing to do that. And then I would love to see him get to the end and give them the boot.
And I think he has that in him to do
Yeah.
it. I think he does.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's funny looking back on season 9 because he was so frustrated that I sent him home. But I was like, I know you would have turned around and done the same thing. And I would have hoped you would have if that was
Mhm.
like, when you're in a Final Four situation, you really need to, I don't know,
You
be.
cut your competition.
I know like exactly what you need to do to get to the end.
Mhm.
I really hope that for him. I think it would be such a fun. I mean, I want to say it would be so fun to see him come back and change his game and win it all, but I'm sure that's what every other person is hoping they do too.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Kieran, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us to talk about Mitchell Hammond.
Yeah.
Everybody else, join the Discord, get your fantasy picks in, buy some merch. I don't know what I'm supposed to be plugging because this is going to air so much further in the future. But but until whenever BBH 15 starts, and whenever the first time you see us on screen for real in the live, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Kieran, again, and goodbye, everybody.